is 12 p.m. You are listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media with me, Mari Makonda. It is International Women's Day, and the theme for this year is Gender Equality for a Sustainable Tomorrow, recognizing the contribution of women and girls around the world who are leading the charge on climate change adaptation, mitigation, and response to build a more sustainable future for all. It is estimated that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. And to discuss this topic with me is Candice Chirwa. Candice Chirwa is a first generation South African Malawian author, gender activist, and a thought leader, better known as Minister of Menstruation, working towards destigmatizing menstruation while also lobbying for an end to period poverty in South Africa. And we will also be joined by Anisa Mazimpaka, and a social justice activist. And we will be Day 8th March. It's International Women's Day. So what does this day mean to you?
Thank you. So I think what International Women's Day means to me is really about, every year we are recognizing that as women we have a phenomenal strength in us, but yet the world hasn't recognized that, and the world doesn't make conducive environments in order for us to flourish, whether it be in careers, whether it be, in terms of health, reproductive health. And so the theme for this year's International Women's Day is Break the Bias. And I know that what that means is that we are asking ourselves to imagine a world where biases don't exist, where stereotypes don't exist, where inequalities, in particular gender inequalities, don't exist. And it's really about then placing onus on ourselves, but also on people who have the power to make the necessary change, and saying, what is it that we need to do in erasing gender inequality? And what are the steps that we need to do in order to ensure that we can see gender equity in our societies? And I think breaking the bias really does speak to eliminating any forms of stereotypes, that comes to women. There's always just these notions that women cannot do things based on their gender. And I think that's the first integral step in removing any form of bias.
Mm-hmm. Right now, what does a gender equal world look like to you?
Sorry, can you repeat? It's very soft.
All right. So what does a gender equal world look like to you?
So a gendered equal world, what it really looks like to me is that no one's capabilities or potentials are looked down upon based on their gender, based on how they look or how they present. I think anyone's potential is unlimited, and they're not ever stopped or hindered based on their gender. So there's no discrimination, there's no stereotype. And I think this speaks solely to just looking at how young people, from a very young age, when you know that a boy is born, there's just this expectation that a boy has to be very dominant, very powerful, cannot be vulnerable. And in the same is also placed on young girls. However, they are expected to be, women, they're expected to give birth and expected to take care of the home. So there's a lot of expectations that are placed on young girls and young boys, and they grow up with this expectation and this heavy burden to carry, that if they don't fulfill this criteria, then it makes it seem as if they failed as individuals. So I really do think that what a gender bias free world, rather, or a world where discrimination doesn't exist based on gender looks like, is really removing that expectation, the gender expectations on young people, so that they can be whatever they want to be. And I think for International Women's Day, we need to be, ensuring that young girls and women, if they want to be astronauts, if they want to be engineers, if they want to be soccer players, if they want to be whatever they want to, they can do that. And they shouldn't be limited based on what is expected of them because of their gender.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking about what you've just said, should we raise our children according to the set gender roles?
I think there is a lot of power in having expectations of what your children should be when
Mm-hmm.
you are a parent. However, I do think there's a lot of limitation and a lot of violence that comes from saying that your girl child, should not be doing male type duties or male type expectations. I think that is very limiting. So parents have to at least raise their children as equal as possible. You should expect your boy child to do duties in the kitchen as much as you expect your girl child to do duties and playing or learning or building something. There should be some equal onus on both, and it shouldn't just be isolation based on their gender. And I think it starts with parents equipping themselves about um, what gender equality means to them, and in particular really finding books on what feminism is, reading that, equipping themselves with that information, and then incorporating that in their parenting style. So I definitely believe that it should be a thing where children should be treated equally, and their duties in the household should be expected to be the same. And I think schools are becoming a little bit more open to this and a little bit more accepting that if a girl child wants to play soccer, they can develop soccer teams. If a girl child wants to be an engineer, they've got classes for that. They can do sciences. So I think there is that stigma and stereotypes that are slowly removing, but it starts at home. It starts with asking the parents if they believe in equality and treating their children that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is so true. I remember our parents, I mean, when we were raised, it was always like, don't do that. That's for boys. And girls are supposed to be like this, and girls don't do this, and girls don't do that. And in fact, with my mom, my daughter loves to climb and jump and do everything, all sorts of things like that. And my mom's like, no, that is not, that is ungirl like, don't do that, etc. And I'm like, but Ma, she just wants to climb. She just wants to jump. She just wants to have fun. So there's absolutely
Mm.
nothing wrong with that. I mean, girls can climb too. Well, what is the problem with girls climbing? I mean, she could miss out on opportunities just because we told her not to do certain things because they are so-called male, or girls shouldn't do it and they're only meant for boys.
Yeah, I definitely experience relate to that personally. Fortunately, I come from a background where my dad really put emphasis on ensuring that both of his girl child daughters learnt about things that often boys would should know about. I mean, at a young age, my dad made it very important to understand how to like take care of elements that would essentially be responsible for men. Also, there was this onus of, if she can climb a tree, if she wants to get dirty, she's more than welcome to. There's this association about tying into a girl's worth based on whether she will be equipped or will be available for marriage. And so if she's seen to be doing very masculine activities or male things, therefore the assumption is that she won't make a great candidate for marriage. And I always just say this should the assumption or the requirement that marriage should be the only aspiration for young girls is something we need to get away with in society.
Mm,
I think that young girls in particular should be taught that they should do whatever they want to do. Even, if they choose to get married, that should be a choice on them. If they choose to have children, that should be a choice on them. But if they find that they enjoy doing things that often society believes are not feminine things, that is okay because that is their free will, that is their own choice at the end of the day. So I think that is something that I personally relate with. And I think I come from a background where I was told to always constantly challenge things. So if a boy told me what you're doing is a boy thing, or the toys you're playing with are meant for boys, I'd be like, well, the function of a toy is for me to have fun, and I'm having fun with it. And either way, if it's blue, it doesn't matter. The color doesn't signify whether I'm qualified to play with it or not based on my gender. And so there's a lot of stereotypes that we as society need to remove away from, like this whole association of what the color means, and whether a girl should only be playing with dolls and a boy should only be playing with things. We don't often notice that the
mhm,
toys, the messages that toys drive, for instance, where
mm,
we see girl toys and it's only a girl doll being in the house with children, and then we see the boy toys and it's engineers, it's scientists, it's
exactly.
everything that just, it doesn't really allow young girls to realize that they can be that as well. So yeah, I definitely think that the stereotypes don't only speak to just us as at home, but it also is driven by society.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember being told that I drive like a man. I don't know why, because I'm like a safe driver. I'm really a safe driver. I just drive fast, and people have been like, "No, you drive like a man." I'm like, "How does a man drive?" Because all the women that I know drive the way I drive. So All right, so Candice, given the work that you do as a period activist, how do you promote gender equality?
So, the first thing that I do, what I always tell people that menstruation isn't a topic that is it's not only a woman and girls issue. I always feel that the boy child needs to be educated and equipped with understanding what menstruation is, because at the end of the day, men will have menstruators in their lives, and there will be moments in their lives where they'll have to realize that they have to either be sent to buy sanitary products, or they have to be sent to get painkillers. And so they shouldn't be afraid, they shouldn't be embarrassed about this. But besides that, I think what the work that I do that in terms of the workshops and driving menstrual education is allowing young girls in particular to be equipped with the necessary empowerment and necessary skills and understanding a natural biological function that happens to the bulk of the world. The silence and stigma that is really imparted on young girls when they start or have their first period is something that society needs to change from, because at the end of the day, it is a biological function. In as much as we go to the loo, we also menstruate every month, and there needs to be the same priority on that, and understanding that our periods are natural. They are bodily function, and there's nothing that we should be ashamed of. But the stigma arises from this connotation that our period blood is dirty, and that because of menstruators impure, they have to stay away from doing other things. And this is unfortunate. This further drives gender inequality. And so I think with International Women's Day, we have to realize how our periods are holding us back, and they shouldn't be. There's a major financial burden that is placed on our periods. We pay so much to gain access to menstrual products. We often also experience very debilitating cramps. So we need to ask ourselves, what does a period positive world look like? And for me, a period positive world looks like where I can just see my period as a biological function, and I don't have to think about what products I need just to survive the week. So this is why it's important, that we understand that menstruation isn't just a woman and girls issue. It's everyone's conversation. Everyone at the end of the day has a responsibility in ending period poverty.
Yes, definitely. Each one has a role to play. Each one is equally responsible in creating a period positive world. And often women and girls face greater health and safety risks as water and sanitation systems become compromised. And we see this in places, disadvantaged areas, rather. And this is tied to the theme for this year of gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow with climate change, and what can we do about it? The risks, there are greater risks that women are going through, especially during their periods, and having to use items that kind of make it challenging and also pose a health risk.
I think there's definitely an element of there's a lack of education that is missing when it comes to puberty and sexual education. There's this fear that parents have when it comes to talking about sex, because they assume that if they talk about sex with their children are going to do it. But I think I'm always of the belief that having a child or a young adolescent equipped with the necessary information to make responsible choices for their future is very important and very critical. And I think with regards to the sustainability issue when it comes to issues of menstruation, luckily we live in an environment, in a world where there are sustainable choices that are being presented, but often the period stigma and taboo um, leads to menstruators not feeling comfortable enough to use period products such as menstrual cups. The menstrual cup does last 5 years overall, and it has a major significance in the environment that we live in, because a sanitary pad takes about 300 to 500 years to disintegrate. So when you think about it, your grandmother's sanitary pad is in the dump right now, and we need to realize that the more people use sanitary pads, the more environmentally damaging that is. So there are options that I think, when it comes to education and equipping the young child with that information, gives them the necessary agency and free will to choose what it is that they want to use when they're menstruating. But also when it comes to puberty and sexual education, they then are equipped and empowered to make critical decisions for their own life, because we often underestimate puberty is such a critical transition into adolescence, and you'd rather educate a young person so that they are transitioning well than just transitioning into fear.
The comment about my grandmother's sanitary pads decomposing. Yeah, no, that's a thought I'd not want to think about anymore. Candice, please stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
The refugee camps in Syria or orphanages in Yemen. The eyes of the needy speak volumes with just one glare. We know what it's like to be at ground zero with food essentials, clothing and blankets, fresh water portal trucks, and even on-site navigators. We use every cent to better their tomorrow. Become part of our journey to bring relief to all. Go to www.ashrafulaid.org or call us on 011 809 8181. Ashraful Aid, under the auspices of Maulana Suhail Wadi.
Babu, why don't you loosen your belt a bit more?
But why now?
Well, it's very tight, blocking air to your brain.
Haju, this is only a start. I need to tighten up a bit more. Funds are tight and the cost of living is high.
Funds are not tight. It's your haram insurance which is tightening our barakat.
Okay, Haju. I will call my insurance friend tomorrow.
Maybe I must tighten up on my cooking from now on too.
No, Haju, we don't need to tighten up. It's okay. Look, I'm even throwing away my belt.
Don't tighten your belt. Change your insurance. Leaving Riba Insurance is easier than you think. Call Amana IFS for all your personal and commercial takaful needs. 0861 786 393. Amana, leave Riba for good. Amana IFS is a registered financial services provider.
Africa. As the crisis in Palestine continues, the Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground facilitating emergency food and medical assistance to the affected families. Donate 15,000 rand or any amount and help the people of Palestine. Call AMA now on 083-251-9376 or donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media with me, Mari Makonda. It's 19 minutes past 12. And if you've just joined us, welcome. We are talking about International Women's Day. And the theme for this year is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow, and the hashtag is break the bias. So what is the bias that you are trying to break? We want to hear it from you, and use the hashtag break the bias or break the bias 2022. You will find it on Twitter. And a happy International Women's Day if you've just joined us. Still with me is the Minister of Menstruation and author Candice Chirwa, and also a gender activist and thought leader, taking us through this bias that we are trying to break. Candice, thank you for staying with us. Now, do you think that the respect for women's rights and gender equality is deteriorating?
I don't think so. I think
Candice, your video is off.
Oh, it shows that the camera's on. I'm not sure what's happening. There we go.
Yes.
There we go. All right. There we go. So I think what has happened is that there's great policy that is being made when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to thinking about access and gender equity in the world. I do, however, think that the stereotypes and the stigma when it comes to, what women empowerment looks like is very, it still exists, it's still prevalent, especially in South Africa, where we have high levels of gender-based violence. We still have very high levels of women experiencing some form of abuse and rape. And so, when we're reflecting on International Women's Day, I think in as much as the onus is to celebrate the progress that gender equality has made, I think it's also often really important to understand, what more should be done in ensuring that we can all just be equals in this world that we live in, and that we don't see our male counterparts as threats. So from a policy perspective, I think there is, policy is there. It speaks to fundamentally protecting us. Our constitution really does speak greatly to ensuring that all who identify, all who live in this country are protected. However, when it comes to implementation, I think there's a lot of greater awareness and education that needs to be done, especially in removing that stigma around women, and especially marginalized groups. When I think about policy, when it comes to addressing period poverty in particular, I also believe that, that the policy exists, but again, it's the implementation. And when you need to implement, you need to provide more education and awareness on the ground. So, yeah.
All right. Now, before we can get, gender equality, etc., and the relationships amongst women, how can we strengthen these relationships and we get women to support each other even more?
Yeah, I definitely, I know that, the one thing that the patriarchy does, which is a social system that benefits men, is that it really drives women to be competitors. And I think what is always important in strengthening women empowerment and strengthening gender equality is recognizing and applauding and collaborating with fellow women. We often need to realize that it is the patriarchy that wants women to compete amongst each other, and that doesn't ever really work. We go further when we collaborate and we're stronger together, and then when we recognize each other's strengths and vulnerabilities as women, we often are able to implement greater things. So I think when it comes to gender equality, we often also need to look within and realize that, we can't really speak greatly about implementing gender equality if we have some form of disdain towards our other sisters or other women. So it's really important that we as women are very cognizant of that, that today we take the time to embrace each other's womanhood and also embrace the fact that we are stronger together.
Yes, we are stronger together indeed. And it seems like you're having a ball of a time, or not you, but the people in the background. I'm going to let you go, but before you do so, how can we promote gender equality for a sustainable future?
I think it really is about I think it's about looking within first, and then asking ourselves what we can do when it comes to implementing gender equality in our spaces that we work in our communities. And it's not just a question that women should deal with, it's also a question that men should ask themselves as well. In the companies that they work in, do they think that they work with enough women or marginalized groups? Do they think that, there's policies actually addressing and ensuring conducive environments for that? So I think it's really important that we look within ourselves to ask ourselves, how can we make our own spaces and communities more gender equal, but then also asking men the same question, and men should have the responsibility in changing that.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time, Candice, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.
Candice Chirwa, author, gender activist, and thought leader, better known as the Minister of Menstruation, working towards destigmatizing menstruation while also lobbying for an end to period poverty in South Africa. And she helped us get through today's discussion on gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow on this year's International Women's Day. Hashtag break the bias. And just to read some of the comments on this hashtag, Okechuku Michael says, on the occasion of International Women's Day today, the outlet celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women, create awareness about women's equality, accelerate gender parity. Hashtag break the bias and stop the label on women. And that's exactly what we should stop doing. We should stop labeling each other, and women should stop labeling, we putting limitations rather on ourselves, because if they can do it, you can do it too. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. Amaka says, we are strong, we are intelligent, we are bold, we are hardworking, we are beautiful, we are unique. The world is incomplete without us, and we deserve to be celebrated. Happy International Women's Day to us. Hashtag break the bias. And lots of other comments coming through right there. And you can also share yours as well about breaking the bias. A strong woman stands up for herself. A stronger woman stands up for everyone else. Hashtag break the bias. And that is the hashtag for this year's International Women's Day. And it's on Twitter. You can also follow the hashtag on Facebook as well, and share your comments and your thoughts with us. We are trying to have gender equality today so that we can have a sustainable tomorrow, because we know that women and girls are the ones who suffer the most. So something definitely needs to be done about this. And raising awareness is what we can do, but we need to do even more than that. It is 12:27. You are listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media with me, Mari Makwanda.